things that I see is as this journey is progressing is that all too often an emergency occurs and you wind up at the hospital with your loved one. And at that point, you find out that nobody has medical power of attorney or no rights to be able to make those decisions. Automatically, a spouse that's living or a sibling or a dependent of the loved one can help make those decisions. But it is so critical to have that documentation in place before you have that emergency when they're asking at the hospital, what documentation do you have? And that can be easily done through seeking the support of an elder law attorney that navigates these roads and knows based on your loved one's situation, what do they need to have? Do they own a home? What assets do they have? Who has control over them? And then the other thing that a family member is really helpful to have is how many bank accounts do they have? Can you get access to those bank accounts? Can you get that documentation all in agreement? Now, mind you, the loved one is not, they're still in their mind, they're independent. They don't need to give up these rights or these responsibilities. So there's a little bit of a dance in order to get that agreement, but sometimes it's an example of somebody was in an accident or someone had a stroke and something happened to them, and then this is what happened. So we just want to be prepared. You're fine. We know you're doing great, but we want to be prepared in case something happens so that it's easier to get the care that you need. And in agreement, we also know what you want. So we've got a medical power of attorney, we've got a power of attorney, we've got someone helping to pay the bills, knowing what the bills are, so that if you're incapacitated for any reason, life still goes on. Don't fall behind on the mortgage payment and take care of all those things and just stay on track to make this journey easier. So as part of the care team, it is very helpful to have a projection of what costs are involved for your loved one. And is just a simple spreadsheet, managing it so that you project out, very similar to running a business. You're going to look at your 1-year costs and then anticipate increases. And I encourage families to just monitor paying the bills on a shared spreadsheet. So the person who is responsible for paying those bills isn't answering the question multiple times for multiple people, and communicate through that. Mom's hair costs this much. Mom's nails cost this much, until those things are handled in different ways. And there's a car payment, and there's what the mortgage is, and then what the income is. What's the veterans benefit? What's the Social Security benefit? Any IRAs that are being paid out on a regular basis. So you're running your home, your loved one's home, as if it was a business. And that is very helpful, and it's a good way to communicate. And it also is less friction because it's obvious. It's not, where did the blah, blah, blah money go? It's right here. Everybody can see it. So in terms of what happened in our family, that was kind of humorous, but you want these documentations in place. You want to have access to them. You want to keep copies yourself. So Mom had a do not resuscitate, and a little further down in her journey, after she broke her hip and she was in a memory care center that was more like a nursing home than a memory care center because she needed that clinical care. They did not receive the DNR that was done before for the assisted living, and we didn't have a copy. I don't know why we didn't have a copy. They actually had to recreate that whole scenario with Mom in a big conference room. All family members had to be present. Mom's in her wheelchair. They brought in an arrhythmia Annie, put her on the table, explained what can happen with compressions and resuscitation. And Mom seemed to be tracking it. And she answered the questions with a little back and forth. But number one, that really wasn't the appropriate way to do it. But even though we had a medical power of attorney, they wanted her to be able to recreate this document. So we get it done and we're all leaving. Mom had a great sense of humor. My brother's pushing Mom out in the wheelchair And she's like, wait, stop, stop. And at that point, Arrhythmia Annie had been moved to the floor. And mom's, aren't you going to let her get up? So we didn't know whether that was her cognition or whether that was her good sense of humor. But in her mind, Arrhythmia Annie was still laying on the floor and she needed some help. So to wrap this up, every family is different, and the documentation that is needed is going to be best determined by an elder law attorney. And there are other online resources that you can use if that's not a good step for you. But there's a long list based on the assets and the valuables and the income, cash flow, all those things. But I really want you to make sure that you figure out a way to do this early on in the journey. Keep copies, keep documentation. And it just makes any part of this transition so much easier.